I feel like you've had the audacity several times.
A lot.
Like, stood on business several times.
Up with the audacity.
The conversations at Ruby's Roundtable is about starting where you are with what you have, taking bold risks and betting big on yourself. That, in a nutshell, is exactly what I'm doing with this podcast, singing, developing a clothing line, and mentoring after having the audacity to quit my TV news job. So I'm telling you about all the challenges and wins along the way. I'm also inviting familiar and respected risk takers, innovators, energizers, entrepreneurs from other careers you may know who are also beating the odds. Through these conversations at the table, not only will you have resources and takeaways to apply to your own journey, but all the motivation for you to take that leap of faith fearlessly. So, will you have the audacity to join us?
LaToya Evans, where do we even start? You have supported, covered, represented notable names, notable businesses, professional athletes, those in the entertainment industry, families of the late Chesley Chris, George Floyd. What is your superpower?
Oh, fresh out the gate with such a tough question. I think it's being authentically me. I think that's it. Especially when it comes to a lot of the touchy subjects, like, unfortunately, grief has become a big part of my profession. Not something I would have ever envisioned, but being able to give people what you would want. And we always say, particularly at LEPR, like, we never put the hit, which is like the media coverage. We never put the hit or the attention or the shine over the actual human. So bringing that authenticity and that humanity and believing in whole personhood has certainly helped me.
Do you think your public relations agency firm that is, let's just say, national at this point, very much national, is successful because you lead with being personable?
In a way. As people who have worked with me know, I am a very straightforward person. I'm a straight shooter. So if you see me more like out and about socially, you may not know that. But professionally, I tend to like give it to people straight. Because that's how I would want people to give me information. Like, don't sugarcoat it, just let me know. But I think that people come for the expertise and honestly the cachet, which is something that's of course developed over time. But people get pride out of working with us, which is cool. Because especially as an unlikely entrepreneur, something that I never thought would happen.
So you started LEPR in 2017 and it's 2024, but you've covered a lot in between that dash so far. What has been the highlight so far?
I think the highlight is being able to get people really their voice out. Being able to give a voice to the voiceless. I mean, of course, we work with major corporations who have platforms, and sometimes they even have a hard time articulating like their value proposition and what they have to offer. But honestly, it's being able to give those people who otherwise wouldn't have had the platform the chance to talk. I mean, especially when we talk about the family of George Floyd, we now live in this culture where when, something happens with the police or something happens publicly in that manner, the family is kind of vocal. They tend to be seen a lot, but not necessarily heard. And I think for them, sharing the stories of George Floyd when he was alive gave it humanity. And it certainly, in my opinion, affects the outcome of a case. I truly believe that.
So let's go back to the pandemic, because 2017 to 2020 was a very short time before everything changed. Did everything change within your business too? And how were you able to pivot?
So when I started LEPR, I was still working. So I was still in corporate part-time. So I had a long corporate career, but what really spawned LEPR was a layoff. It was a reorg. I left a job that I really loved. that I was really good at to become a C-suite communications leader at another Fortune 500 company. And that was a huge deal because, I was like 30 years old and in the C-suite, and that was my dream.
Right.
And so I get to this corporation and I'm there a year tops, not even, because there was just a change in the business. It was still a new CEO. And they had tried out that role with 2 other people like in the year before me.
Okay.
So it should have been something that I saw coming, but I was performing well, so I didn't see that. It was just one of those things. So in that stopgap between going from there to getting my other role, like when I was having the conversation with the CEO,
right,
which is completely unexpected for me, the first thing that came to my mind was, but I don't want to leave Charlotte.
Right.
And that was because I had gone through multiple other corporate relocations. So Charlotte was actually my first stop, third stop, even though I'm a native North Carolinian.
Right.
So I'd lived in New York, I lived in Arkansas, and then Bank of America brought me to Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I like it here. I don't want to leave. And when you're in corporate, your job dictates where you live. And that was before where we live now, where remote work was like literally accepted everywhere, where it's, back then it really wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to try to make it work. So literally maybe a week or so later, I ended up sitting next to, at the time, Mayor Pro Tem Vilaus.
Okay.
And it was still a very crowded field for the mayoral race. And she had, obviously some good competition, like the incumbent mayor. And she had David Howard, who's amazing. Like, it was stiff competition.
Right.
And so I was like, I think you're going to win. Because I had worked on other campaigns before, just not, in a true, like, official capacity. But I've done comms for campaigns. I was like, I think you're going to win. And they tell me that they're looking for someone to do communications. And I was like, great. And so that ended up being LEPR's first client, still a client to this day. Obviously, she ran that historic race.
Right.
Became, Charlotte's first Black woman mayor.
Yes.
So that was technically my first client. And when the campaign was over, I actually had another role, another executive role, huge job, another one I also loved. But in similar fashion, it was just time for me to go.
And blossom.
It was time. And it's so interesting because I always say, of course, God's timing is perfect. I say that if I had not been let go of that job in 2017, I wouldn't have been able to help Mayor Laus.
Right.
If I had not left my last corporate job in 2019, I would have missed everything. I got out just in time. So in 2019 in the summer, left my last job, ended up, by that time I had consistent clients anyway. I just wasn't convinced to let them go.
Right.
Once I went back to corporations because I had already seen how they kind of treat people. And I'd seen it already. So I wasn't willing to let go of any independence that I had to go back into a job. By this time I was kind of hip to it. So I think I had like 3 or 4 clients on the side. Yeah. And so I ended up traveling with Andrew Yang for his presidential campaign. Then I ended up at Bloomberg, and then the Biden work started. Then George Floyd happened.
Yeah.
And literally, I got the call for George Floyd as soon as the video became viral. Right. I was on vacation. I was in Hilton Head, just taking like a little long weekend. And I remember I was heading to dinner, and it was a call out the blue. And they were just like, we're the family of George Floyd, and we want your help.
I was wondering what your process is. Do you just get that call? Do you sometimes?
Do, typically, okay. Yes. So what's great about LEPR is that we don't advertise, we don't solicit. Right. We very rarely participate in RFPs. We only started doing that more recently. And that's if it's something compelling. But I call it the red phone. The red phone rings. People find me. They call my personal cell. They call my office. They email. But they find me. And then it's time to rock and roll. It's time to go after that. But yeah, it tends to start as these calls out the blue, and it's always like that with major celebrities, presidential candidates. Your phone just rings one day, and there it is.
How do you control who you're going to represent and who you choose not to represent?
So fortunately, it really is about... It's about, like, a lot of it deals with character. Okay. Believe it or not. Like, we love honest people. Right. That's core for a relationship. Right. We don't really consider necessarily a risk to us representing someone who may have had trouble in the past.
Okay.
That being said, we have represented controversial figures before. Right. It's just about making sure, like, is there a story that we can tell? Like, is their point valid? Is this something that is relevant? Is this something we can do? But it typically boils down to, like, are they a good person? Are we going to be able to work with them? Are they coachable?
Right.
Which is huge. A lot of people don't listen. Even some of our best clients don't listen.
You got to reel them back in.
They don't. Not everybody listens. And that's important too. But especially if you're like in a tight spot,
right.
or, there's some ramification to if this PR doesn't go well,
right.
You may end up in prison, or it may, like, that's still a thing. It's important to be able to have coachable people.
Which representation did you walk away from and say, yes, I did exactly what I needed to do. I felt very happy. I felt very pleased about the outcome. And if I have to represent another client, I'll do exactly that.
God, just about most of the things I've done.
Okay.
I don't want to single out a single person or a single organization, but very rarely do I come away with regrets.
Okay.
I try to live my life with no regrets.
Okay.
I mean, and, one of my sayings I say to myself is like, God doesn't waste any experience, so like every little thing that I've experienced in my life, it has been, and fortunately enough, I get to often see it on the other side, like why I experienced it or what the cause was. But very rarely do I come out of an engagement or something feeling like I just shouldn't have done that, or I should have done it differently. But I do have those moments, but it's more often that I'm happier with my work than not happy with it.
I love that. So talk about a time where maybe it was a challenge, or maybe it was, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board, or maybe I need to shift. I didn't do anything wrong, but I need to shift the way we lead or we go forward. Mm-hmm. How were you able to challenge yourself to get better, or to, I guess, pivot in the moment where it's like, okay, we need to shift?
Yeah. I mean, on the business standpoint, because it's also like the business side and then the practice side. On the business side, it was more so putting parameters in place for my business, more protections. Like our contract, for instance, it's got practically everything in it.
Okay.
Pretty much every scenario that we've seen, even though they're not necessarily the most common thing, but also just trying to do best practices. Like knowing instantly when you sign somebody, you're like, okay, we already know this is going to be a difficult client. We know they're going to be hard to work with. Like, and actually setting that expectation, even if we don't necessarily say that out loud. We get the hint because it looks like something else. And I say that's true in PR in general. Something that you have on your desk today looks like something that you saw 5 years ago. It just may have different people. It's always looks almost identical to something else. It just comes in a different package. So that's it on the business side. But on the PR front, I mean, there's a situation I'm working on right now where this is the first I've seen. Like, I've not seen anything like this where it's, and I've been attacked before in the media. Like, I've gone head to head with bloggers. Like, people have talked about me on, like, in media before, which is not the way it's supposed to be as a publicist, but we live in a different environment now. Like, when I first started doing PR, like, PR people were not popular. They were not celebrities. They were not any of that. They were not on podcasts. They were not, well, back then I guess it was Blog Talk Radio, but like they just weren't doing that.
It's very like, face forward now.
Now it is
very much,
and that happened like overnight. Like, I felt like I saw this shift maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because I've now been doing this 20 years almost. So this has been like a long time. So honestly, I've never seen people like really just wage a war against other PR people because they're mad that you got a client they didn't. They may go on personal attacks. I mean, I've seen some PR people really take aim at me, and a lot of times that's because they think I'm their competition. But the reality is that most of the time, the people who are fighting you, You're not their competition.
Right.
Like, I always say, just because I live in Charlotte, because that's where I chose to live, I've lived everywhere. Like, most of our clients aren't in Charlotte. They're everywhere. They're like in New York, or they're in Miami, or, you know, they're everywhere. So I don't consider myself a competitor to Charlotte PR people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, we may have some overlap, but that's not a direct competitor, you know? Like, and so people go and have whole wars and beefs with you, where it's a one-sided beef. Like, I've had one PR person, I've been blocked probably for her for like 6 years.
Okay.
And I'm just like, it wasn't even that deep.
Okay.
It wasn't even, it was never that deep.
How do you have tough skin in the game? Because, I mean, come on, you do have a good list of clients. You do set the bar high. How do you continue to push yourself knowing that you're doing the work and everything that has led you up to this point has been very purposeful?
I mean, purpose, like, my work is deeply tied to my purpose. And so that's part of the reason why I feel like, you know, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is why it's successful, because I actually have a purpose in the work. Like, I am here to fulfill certain things. Like I said earlier, I have to be certain places at the right time to influence destiny. And that's just the way it is. You know, I'm a vessel, I'm a tool. And that's the way I view my profession. So when you view it like that, it's very difficult to be angry at anything that anybody else has, because I have a very specific mission. Like, it may be a job to somebody else, but for me, it is my purposeful work, and I am fortunate enough to be rewarded financially for it. That's how I view it.
I love that.
It's just an amazing thing, because it takes some people their entire life to find their purpose, but I already know mine.
Right.
You know, so with that being said, you know, tough skin, focusing on the work. I focus on the work, and I tell people this, even at my nail salon, I tell the girls this: if you focus on your work, the money always takes care of itself. Like, focus on the purpose, focus on the mission. You got to be focused, and you got to have your head in the game. The moment that you start getting distracted by everything else is the moment you fail.
So how does LaToya stay focused? How do you wake up with this urge, this drive to, hey, I'm going to go after it today? How did you get to that point?
Need. I like nice things, but not just that. Now it's like, there are people who depend on me. I have employees here, I have employees over there, I have a family that needs my support, you know, so it's a lot of need, but it's also like, this is just what I have to do today. This is how I'm fulfilling my purpose today. You know, it's just what has to be done.
Right.
You know, and like you asked me before we started filming, like, what's the first thing that was on my mind is like, got to get ready to go. Like, oh my God, I overslept a little bit. You know, like, got to get ready to go. Everything is usually on a schedule. Like, even though I'm a Gemini, I'm like the most unusual Gemini, because I stay on a schedule.
Okay.
Or I try to.
Okay.
You know, I'm a planner.
Okay.
I like to say that I am like predictably spontaneous. So like, for instance, like, I love to travel. Okay. So I may book a trip to some place if I'm stressed out that I go to a lot.
Right.
Like maybe Turks, maybe Cayman, or, you know, some place that I go to relax. Right. Like, but you don't know I'm going to do it. Maybe I do it the day before. Right. Maybe I do it a couple days before. Okay. But you know exactly what I'm going to do when I get there. Right. I'm going to eat. I'm going to drink. I'm going to relax. But you never know. Like, I book a flight the morning of and go.
I love that. Just go. Just do it.
Just do it. Life is short. So I love living in that spontaneity too.
I love that. I definitely love that for you. And I can't wait to get to the point where it's like, hey, this morning I just want to go eat crab legs here, and just do it.
And that's exactly what it is. If you can do it, if you don't have anything on your schedule, or you can move it, because that mental health break
is so important.
Ooh. It's important. It really is.
Especially when, going back to what you said, people depend on me. Yeah. So how can you pour from an empty cup when you have so many people depending on you? So you have to put yourself first.
Yeah, you really can't. And that's the thing that I've just had to learn, because I'll work myself to death, get overwhelmed, get sick. Like, I missed the DNC because I got sick. Right. And, you know, it was like, after that, it's like, okay, I'm going to go to Cayman. I really need to, like, relax myself. I need to get my head in the game and, and recover. But it's like you run yourself ragged a lot of times. That's how I feel.
Would you say there was any part of your journey where you were people pleasing?
I think there's always some element of people pleasing.
Okay.
And I definitely know that comes from my childhood as an overachiever. Like I've always been who I am, pretty much. You know, like I've never been somebody really different from that. You know, so I think people pleasing is still part of my life because we want people to be happy. Right. You know, like I have to deliver hard news a lot. Yeah. I have to tell people bad news. But I try to make sure it lands softer than what it needs to be, even though I'm not like a sugar coater, per se. You know, so yeah, it's tough. There is some people pleasing because you can't have a business if people aren't happy with you. Socially, even in Charlotte and beyond, you know, there are just some things that have to be done, you know, to gain, you know, some not social status, but social points with people. I mean, you know, you may want to be able to build a relationship with someone and maybe you have something to offer them. You know, that's just unfortunately the way a lot of deals are done and the way a lot of things happen in society.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take it back a little bit. Describe public relations, having a publicist, because you also deal with crisis communication. So when on the surface, somebody might think, oh, they're going to get me on TV. They're going to get me the articles. Or if I have this big company and something goes down left, then they're going to be the representation. Is there a different angle that you see that people do not see?
Oh, God, it's the endless amount of work. Okay. It's the endless work. I mean, people say it's a thankless job because you always, I mean, to get a story, maybe you pitch 5 people. You know, you're just emailing, asking for people to get on stations, but it is a 24-hour job. Like, people don't think when they see me out at parties or events, that is work. Yeah. Even if I'm not throwing the event, I am here. Yeah. Make no mistake, I am here for the job.
Yeah, networking.
Yeah, you know, because no one wants a publicist who sits in the house. Like, that was actually one of the things that attracted my initial clients to me, was that, you know, it's just that, like, oh my God, I didn't even know about this. How do you know about this? Can I go with you? You know, like, that's how a lot of, like, the brands got interested in me before I even was a LEPR. Okay. Because they always saw me at cool and interesting places that they weren't aware of. So you have to keep that up. So you wake up 5, 6 a.m. Okay. You write. It's a intensive writing. You also have to consume a lot of news. I read a lot. I'm an avid reader. People have no idea how much I read in a day because you can't relate anything to news if you don't know what's going on. Right. So you kind of have to be like up on trends. You have to know everything that's going on. So I consume a lot of media in a day. Okay. Then you got to have meetings with people. Then you got to negotiate contracts. So you do that all day. And then at 5 o'clock, your makeup artist is at the house to get you ready for your evening work, which is going to parties and going to events and entertaining. Right. It's going to the dinners, you know, and then you do that maybe all weekend. That's the job. So it's a 24-hour thing. And people think, oh, you know, it's so much fun. I mean, it is, but it's really like a lot of work. I had a friend who used to joke and he would say, they think that PR is just you standing on red carpets. And he was right. And this is someone who has other friends who are in PR. And he was like, that's because everyone wanted to be a PR girl for a while because that's what they thought it was. It was just standing on red carpets and meeting people. Okay. Well, we are hearing it here first that, hey, it is a grind. It is time, your presence, your energy, your being to just be in front of people that you do and don't know and represent your brand and yourself in the best way, because you never know how that may come full circle. Exactly. It's just, it's a tough one. It's like, you know, now the trend has become, soft life and, you know, trad wife. And that's the trend now. And I'm like, I'm still stuck in like boss babe era of like 2019 a little bit, because it's like of what I chose as a profession. It's like, I'm sorry, like I can soft life like maybe once a month, but I can't soft life the whole life. I just can't. So what is next? Well, in terms of what?
Just you, the brand, the business, what you want to do. If you have crossed all of these T's, and let me not tell you what you've already done, but from my end, if you have been so successful in so many different areas, is there something missing that you're like, this is next? I got to get this next.
Well, this is coming out in November, right?
Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is.
Well, I think the big secret is that, it's no secret that I've been working on a family for a long time.
Yes.
This has been like a challenging part for me. And it's something that I didn't even expect or experience or know that this was going to be part of my story. But I think that that's really why I've also worked so hard more recently. I have a surrogate who's pregnant.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm expecting a baby in early 2025.
I want to scream so loud for you. This is amazing.
Yeah, so that's why I've had so many questions for you. Like, when's this coming out? But yeah, so that's really, the next step for me is being able to be maybe not, my soft girl era, but, my mom era. And that's what I've wanted for so long.
Yeah.
And, especially pursuing surrogacy, being unmarried. And, it's been, of course, as you can imagine, a very expensive challenge, and that's really also fueled some of my work as well.
Yeah.
And knowing that, like, this child's going to depend on me for the rest of my life. So I have to absolutely, make sure that, I'm on the up and up and I'm able to do good work so I can provide for my family.
Right. And this has been a journey.
Oh, yes, it has been a journey. My baby Charlotte, who passed in 2022, was my 5th natural pregnancy. Mm-hmm. So I've never had any IVF, like any of that. So getting ready for surrogacy was my first time going through, like, at least the, transfer process, even though it wasn't on me, it was on my gestational carrier. And I froze my eggs during the pandemic.
Okay.
So this was like the first time to be able to use all the different eggs I froze, and things like that, to be able to, get ready to have this child.
So for moms, working moms who are having a similar story to yours, what advice would you give them through your highs, your lows, your challenges, since you've gone through this process where you're learning yourself, learning your body, what it can do, what it can't do, and the times where you've had to come to the decision where you are now?
I mean, it's stay the course. And the outcome is different for everyone. And I think one of the things that has frustrated me in, like, my 10-year fertility journey, because now at this point I had my first stillborn, which is insane to even say, 11 years ago. So, this has been a long time for me.
Right.
So the outcome looks different for everyone, but what I have found value in and what other people have been able to get from me is to be able to tell your story.
Right.
Because there were so many times where I wasn't sure that my story would have a happy ending. And, the reality is that even though it has an ending, it's not the ending that I expected.
Right.
I would have never guessed that I would end up with a gestational carrier, especially, again, as a still relatively young, unmarried Black woman living in the South. Like, I'm told those things are not for me. Those things are for celebrities with tons and tons of money and, people. It's just, that's not what I would have expected to be part of my story. And there was never any indication before that. But also understanding that if you're a happy ending, it may be self-actualization. Mm-hmm. It may be giving back. It may be adopting. It may be surrogacy. Or maybe, you'll be fortunate enough and be able to have your own child. But outcomes look different for different people. And, I've told people even in this journey, I struggled with taking the surrogacy route because I was afraid it would make me unrelatable to other women who followed my journey for the last 10 or so years.
Or more unique because you are this woman who you just said and still in this boss area who is going after it day in, day out, but you still have this end goal of having a family. So more unique that you are figuring it out. You're being so authentic about it and saying, hey, this is a decision I had to make. And if you're in the same process, this is how you can
and
cope.
it can be done. I remember there really were, and it's not completely counted out that I will be able to carry my own child. That's still on the table for the future, but timing with this just aligned because of other health issues. Like I had a breast cancer scare, like there were other things that aligned that just, this was the train that made it to the station fastest, versus me going and trying out this other surgery I had that is supposed to, help fertility outcomes.
Right.
But I remember sitting in the hospital shortly after my daughter had passed, and the doctor that I ended up changing, who was a man, and I ended up going with a female doctor who saved my life, who I love to death. He said, you really might want to consider surrogacy, especially on the brink of losing my life, and the fact that, like, if they didn't get my sepsis and the infection under control, that was a very real possibility that I could die. And he said, you should consider surrogacy. And I remember sitting there, and some of my girlfriends were in the room, most of whom were married, and it was just like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to afford that. I don't care what the papers say about how many millions, or I don't care. I was like, there's no way in hell this is going to happen. And then next thing I knew, like step by step by step, it just worked. It just worked. And then next thing I knew, I'm now, near the end, and that's been like a year or so process in the surrogacy journey. But it went sitting in that hospital, it felt like my dream would never come true once I heard those words. It felt like that was impossible. But to your point, being in your boss era, it's about wanting something and going to get it, letting them tell you no. And that's been like the beauty of my story. In 2022, when you were in the hospital, what did you tell yourself on how you could push through? I don't think that I did tell myself to pull through.
Okay.
When given the choice of like, do you want like your baby to live, or do you want, yourself to live? I chose my daughter, so I was ready to, I was ready to go. I was fine with that, because that's just, I was like, if this is the way it ends, this is the way it ends. I'm at peace with it. And I was at peace with it. But my family was not at peace with it, which is also incredible to have such a strong support system. But really, pushing through was about getting to that goal. And as someone who has won all their life, who has been like, grew up doing beauty pageants, grew up being an overachiever, one of the things that is a pro and a con about me is my desire to win and to get what I want. And I knew that if I didn't get out that bed, I was never going to get my ultimate dream. And that's motherhood. I think every woman wants to have it all. And I think there's variations for that, because for me, motherhood has always been more desirable than marriage. This coming from a woman who's been engaged 3 times. So, I'm the marrying kind, I guess, but it's like, no, I've always wanted to be a mom forever. And so if I didn't get out of that bed, out of that hospital, that was never going to be reality for me. And I think that's a important driver.
Right. She was pushing you. She was pushing you to get out of the bed. Your daughter was. So you can live and embrace what was to come, which is now you're experiencing this next beautiful chapter. And I believe in that moment, just by hearing you talk, that it was her. You were trying to push her and she was pushing you.
Oh, yeah. Because, I was like, after my water broke, I was like, if she is alive, then I'm going to do everything I can to, keep her alive. If she's in the game, I'm in the game. And that's what I told my doctor. Like the moment that she's not, okay, that's a different story. But there's no way that I'm going to, terminate any pregnancy, especially this late in the game. If she's still, her heart's still beating, she's still okay in there, well, then we're just going to try to travel through this.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Yes. When are you due?
So March.
Okay.
March.
Okay. Oh, how are you preparing yourself, your home?
I think it's more of the mental preparation.
Okay.
It's the mental and emotional preparation. It's more than what I thought it would be.
Okay.
For sure, mentally and emotionally, what I thought it could be. And a lot of that has been people specifically telling me, like, hey, you're going to live in a different reality. Like, yes, you had this desire,
right,
but the outcome is not necessarily going to look like what you thought it would be.
Okay.
And that has been a grief within itself.
Okay.
Is that you expected one thing of your goal and it took you a longer time, or the outcome looks different. And that's been one of the biggest preparations for me, is being able to mentally and emotionally prepare for this, especially as someone who's been pregnant with their children before. I think the difference is, if you've never experienced it, it's very different. Very different.
Do you find peace with having support from women who've gone through surrogacy before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've got a network of them, but even their story is different from mine.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, everyone's story is different.
Right.
I think one of my main resources, who's been like an open book about surrogacy, she was never necessarily made it to a second or third trimester. You know, so her experiences in childbirth are going to be so different from mine. You know, for someone who has carried babies, who's gone to ultrasounds, who, you know, have been through labor and delivery, quite frankly, to now having your baby, like, it's interesting because I say I have literally a child on earth again.
Yes.
Like, literally, it's just not here anymore.
Yeah.
But, like, to know that, like, no, it's like I'm still living, like my legacy is still real.
Yes.
That's amazing within itself.
Are you nervous about anything? Are you anxious about anything outside of the mental? Is there anything where it's like, March is gonna come?
Well, I had a sleepover this weekend for some of my girlfriends, and we had like pool time, and then, you know, we baked cookies, all the fun things. And then my best friend, she looks at me after like we're like a half a bottle of champagne in, and she says, so you know you're gonna have to childproof this whole house, right?
Right.
She was like, this has got to go. Like, she was like,
she just had a moment.
She was like, you do know, because she has 2 kids. She's like, you do know you're gonna have to like tear all this down.
Yeah.
And so we basically decided, like, it's gonna be kind of like Kim Kardashian's white room.
Okay.
No kids are in the living room. It's just too much work.
Right.
But luckily, the baby's not gonna walk for a while, so maybe I will end up doing that part of the house. But she's like, you do you understand how much ground you have to cover? It'll come.
But I'm glad we all have that one friend that's like, you know what? Wait.
Yes.
Listen.
And it was like literally out the blue. Like, we're just sitting there. She's like, so you do realize.
Right. No, I love that you have that support system around you, who you can call on, who can just be with you in this moment, because I have an amazing set of girlfriends. I have an amazing family. My mom is super supportive. I remember when I was pregnant with baby Charlotte, I was going to go to the first ultrasound alone. And one of my girlfriends came with me, you know, and it was just like, I was just, you know, because men, depending upon how they kind of are, they don't always do that. It depends on the guy. Yeah. But I was just like, after everything I've been through, I was just afraid. You just wanted to do it. And she came, and, you know, it was much better. Then we went out to eat at Capitol Grill afterward, you know. So even if your pregnancies don't always end, you know, in live birth, you can still have like good memories from them. You can still have good times with good people, and really that's part of your journey too. Right. It just doesn't always end like we think it's going to. Thank you so much for sharing about your experience with pregnancy, your experience with surrogacy. I know there are going to be women who are watching this who may not know your story, but are going to be so compelled to be authentic, be open, find their community, find support because of you. Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. No problem. So one last question. Well, couple, I think. Okay. But what would you tell the woman or the young lady who wants to go into public relations and she's not sure? Maybe she was in a different career. You started as a reporter. You've had so many different corporate jobs until you finally said, this is where I want to go. How would you encourage her? Honestly, it's really to not just stay the course, but I would say working for people has been
part of not maybe my biggest superpower, but definitely one of them.
Okay.
Because I say that I'm one of the best because I worked for the best. And, you know, I know like how things work in corporations because I've worked there. I've done PR there. You know, and I had some great bosses. I like to say I've worked for everybody. I mean, I've worked for everybody from Anna Wintour to, you know, major CEOs. Like, I have worked for everybody.
Yeah.
At some point, I have been somebody's lackey. I've been somebody's executive. And I think that now in this age that we live in, so many people think that working for someone is beneath them, but it's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
So take the internship, shadow people, like, get to learn the actual industry before you kind of strike out on your own and become self-taught. Like, learn from the best of the best.
Okay. From a business and organization standpoint, what advice would you give them when they're seeking out a publicist?
The proof is in the pudding. You know, like, if you can go on someone's Instagram or someone's website and you don't see media coverage, that's like your big red flag right there. They should also be able to tell you what kind of PR they do. But really, you're looking for the actual press coverage. You're looking for something that's real, that you can touch, because a lot of people will talk a good game. But ultimately, you get into PR, you go there for your business because you want results. You want people to know about your business. So if there's a PR person and they haven't had any results, then they're not for you.
Okay. How would you know if you need a publicist versus you don't need a publicist?
Anytime the news starts calling you, you need to go ahead and say, like, maybe it's not like a long-term engagement,
Right.
but anytime you're starting to get attention from reporters or there's something negative going on with your business, but anytime someone wants to start interviewing you about something, that's when you at least need to, like, start the exploration.
Okay.
Like, start the conversation that, like, hey, I'm not sure if this is what I need. Like, do I need a 6-month retainer? Do I need a year retainer? Or do I just need some project help? Because a lot of times reporters will call you and then you'll go and you do an interview and you miss an opportunity because no one's vetting it for you. I mean, our goal is to always make sure that our PR clients are able to use every opportunity to their benefit.
Right.
Even if it's a trend piece.
Right.
Even if it's about, you know, businesses are closing. Well, hey, we're doing fine.
Right.
You know, like, that's what we try to make
Right.
it beneficial for them. But anytime you start to see people start calling you, or you just want to promote.
Right.
You just want more attention around your business.
Okay. Based on your successes, your challenges, your leaps of faith, your pivots, finish the sentence. Girl, have the audacity to
Go after what you want.
Okay.
I love that.
You go after what you want. Have the audacity. I feel like you've had the audacity several times.
A lot.
Like, stood on business
Apparently
several
I wake up
times.
with the audacity.
Listen, if that's what you got to do to go after it, then that's what you have to do.
I wake up with the audacity. I like that.
Hey, you hard, student.